penultimate round of Season 6 of GT3 Championship presented by Apex Online. Round 7 will take place at Zandvoort. But before we get on to the action at this track, let's have a quick recap of the last round at Kyalami. It was Matt Cooley who qualified on pole with Olgars alongside him. And as the drivers went into turn 1, there were a few collisions further down the field. But coming out of the first few corners, it was Cooley in first place. More chaos on the end of lap 1, caught up a number of drivers. And the penultimate corner, most of the drivers got away cleanly and pulled back onto the track. It was Tripp who was having a bit of a nightmare race. Started the race quite high up, but proceeded over the course of the hour to slowly go backwards. And Nyns, having added to the decor of his car with a Please No Punterino on the tail, was involved in a number of incidents. So clearly that has cursed his car. Loro was one of those drivers who moved slowly up through the field, overtaking there the 833 Beeswax Racing. That was another car that moved steadily up through the field as the race went on, along with ex-FSR Torpedo. In this case being overtaken by a fellow Lexus in the form of John Becker. Sawas was one of those drivers though towards the front of the field, but it all went wrong right at the end of the race for Sawas. But at this point, it's in a tight battle between himself, Olgars, and just behind them, Luca Ziga. But with just a couple of laps to go to the end, the battle was still ongoing and coming down the start-finish straight. It's an unfortunate mishap. Sawas trying to find a way past Olgars. But either misjudges something or makes a mistake, but he catches the back of the McLaren, spinning Olgars straight out and into the wall, and goes through to take that place, moving him into third. Ziga following through into fourth. The stewards may well have a view on that incident. It was Cooley who came across the line in first place, just coming around the last few corners now. So another victory for Cooley. With just 2 rounds to go, left him with a very solid lead on the Drivers' Championship. Fodor looking to come across the line in second, and Ziga in the end was third. Where was Sawas? Sawas had a disaster on the last lap. Ran out of fuel, pulling over to the track here to come to a stop. And running out of fuel meant he finished all the way down in 16th place, but there's still the possibility the stewards would have looked unkindly on that incident with Olgars with just a few laps to go. So Sawas' race ends in disaster. Moving on to the Drivers' Championship following the result from that race. Matt Cooley moved into first place now with 517 points. He's now 156 points clear of second place Wilfred Bagil. With only 2 rounds to go, it's going to be a tall order for Bagil to catch and overtake Cooley. Ziga in the 488 team into third place, Kangsep down to 4th, Fodor 5th, John Becker of RacingSimTools.com is in 6th place, Hendrik Sawas into 7th, Jamie Ellis 8th, ex-FSR Torpedo moved into 9th, and Ben Hitchcock of the 488 team dropped down into 10th. For the Teams Championship, things are a little bit closer. The McVitie's Hobnob team of Matt Cooley and Tripp are at 595 points, just 59 points clear of second place 488 team. Luca Ziga, Ben Hitchcock will be looking for a good result in the final 2 rounds, see if they can get that first team place away from the McVitie's team. FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com, Dan Smith and John Becker lying third, but they're a little bit further behind. And then there's quite a big gap down to the 4th place Beeswax Racing team. Nils Nyns, Steve Bezic moving ahead of Big Boatley coming away from Kyalami. Big Boatley, Paul Hinsley, Paul Scott, don't think they've turned up for the last couple of rounds. They've slipped all the way down into 5th now. TWG Racing, Demi Ayo and Sindri Ragnarsson, they occupy 6th place. Phoenix Racing, Lord Nem and Radomir Kajerskit are in 7th. And rounding out the table, it's Mercs and Recreation, Vasilis Amiglas and Andrei Kuchar. I don't think Vasilis has attended the last few rounds, so it's going to be difficult for Mercs and Recreation to get themselves back in it. So moving on to the next round, the qualifying results. It was a difficult qualifying session. The weather pattern predicted also for the race being quite mixed, with a strong possibility of rain at some point during the race. The Zandvoort track is quite tight and twisty, But coming away from qualifying, it's Marcin Olgars in first place with a time of 1:39.89. Alongside him, it's Matt Cooley again from McVitie's Hobnobs, just 0.072 seconds behind the McLaren. On row 2 in third place, it's Hendrik Sauerwas alongside Wilfred Bugil. On row 3, it's Ivar Kangsep. Ivar's got a stop-go penalty of 30 seconds handed down by the stewards for incidents in previous rounds. He'll be hoping to keep his nose clean for the final 2 rounds. That stop-go is really going to hurt him though at the start of the race. In 6th place, alongside Ivar, it's Ben Hitchcock of the 488 team. Row 4 in P7, it's Robert Fodor alongside Conal McCarthy. Row 5, Karel Pereira alongside Sindre Ragnarsson of TWG Racing. And row 6, Brandon Baker starts 11th, but has also got a drive-through penalty handed down by the stewards. He's alongside Lucas Ziga of the 488 team. Row 7, Dami Ayo of TWG Racing alongside James Fresh. Row 8 is Radomir Kajerski of Phoenix Racing alongside Andrei Kuchar of Merckx and Recreation. On row 9 is John Becker of FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com. Quite a long way back for John this week. Lord Nem of Phoenix Racing is alongside him. Row 10, it's Christopher Ralph alongside Nils Nyns of Beeswax Racing. Row 11, it's Kevin Rugseng alongside Daniel Oppenheisen. Row 12, it's the other Beeswax Racing of Steve Bezic alongside ex-FSR Torpedo. On row 13, it's Dan Smith of FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com alongside Uras Huzjak. First driver over 2 seconds away from the pole sitter. Row 14, Adam Bowers alongside Matt O'Brien. Row 15, another driver with a drive-through penalty at the start of this race. Domagoj Tonzetic alongside Tripp of McVitie's Hobnobs. Tripp's clearly had a bit of a difficult qualifying there to be so far back in the field. Jordan Watson lines up on 31st place alongside Rob Jackson. And Pablo Loro rounds out the field. And we join the field just as they go under the start-finish banner. The lights are turned green and on the start-finish straight into the first corner. First hairpin, Tarzan box. Track narrows as they go through this. It's into a slight wriggling straight. Tricky right-hander. You've got to take right onto Geraltbocht, leading through onto Hugenholzbocht. Very awkward left-hand corner. You've got to get the car's position right on here to try and get the best speed around the weave-in, what can be classified as the main straight for this track. Driver's going in right then left, and right again. Or braking hard for Shivlak. Sweeping right-hander, he's into a tight right-hand corner of Marlborough Bocht. And then the next corner is very difficult. There's no real brake markers for Renault Bocht. And into the open left-hander of the Vodafone box. Sauerwas up the inside of Cooley there. Cooley loses a little bit of the rear end of the car. And they think he may be losing another place there as we come up towards the chicane, the Audi S Bocht. Chicane will probably be the site of a number of overtakes in this race. As they come out of the chicane, yeah, there's a big gap forming there to the front 2. Ivar Kangsep in the middle. Cooley dropped down into 5th from the looks of that. Into the right-hander then of Kumhobocht. Into the final right-hander of Ravni Levutnobocht. And I can assure you from this point forward we'll be sticking to corner numbers, I think. Difficult track to pronounce. I'm sure Nils Nyns is enjoying every moment of this commentary. The drivers complete the first lap of Circuit Zandvoort. Looking back at the start again. You see all the drivers who've started this race with penalties. McCarthy there with a drive-through. Don't recall being advised McCarthy had a drive-through. Perhaps he was out of position for the start procedure. Kangsep's got that stop-go 30 seconds. Baker's got a drive-through too. I don't know what happened there with Kruzok in front of the 833 of Bezic. Didn't seem to be any contact, but Kruzok's off onto the grass. The 833 car is through, and then Nissan have O'Brien there, trying to get up the inside. Turn 3 onto the main straight-ish. It looks to be tucking in behind Nils Nyns and ahead of the 833 car. But aside from those two cars coming together, it looks a clean first lap for the rest of the field so far. We're into lap 2. Rob Jackson here in the McLaren being attacked by XFSR Torpedo. Torpedo's through there. Right behind is Ben Hitchcock in the Ferrari. Jackson's gone wide there, right into the gravel trap. And I'll definitely allow Hitchcock to get through. Trips in the background, looking for an opportunity, especially to make up from a difficult time he had in Kailami last round out. Not close enough to capitalise on the mistake there by Jackson. But certainly Torpedo did, along with Hitchcock. Bit of a big gap forming. On lap 3, Sindri Ragnarsson this time being attacked by Wilfred Bajil. Wilfred, second place of the championship, needs to get a lot of points. Cooley is ahead, so Bajil really needed that place and gets through. Ragnarsson drops down into 6th. But Ragnarsson immediately has Piquera in the Ferrari on his tail, looking for a way through. We're on lap 4. A lot of action early on in the race. James Fresh now attacking John Becker in the Lexus. Fresh looks to be trying to get up the inside of the Renault box as they're coming up towards the Vodafone box. They'll be side by side, but Becker will have the better line on the inside. Force the Ferrari back behind him. So a little nibble, but not enough for Fresh in the Ferrari to get through. Up to lap 6, it's Jordan Watson. Driver who's up and down the field quite a lot, so he's got a lot of speed. He does keep drawing the attention of the stewards. He's a good position here, but gets clonked right up the inside there. That looked like XFSR Torpedo, spanning right round in the chicane, and he's quite trapped now as the rest of the field comes through. Watson electing to turn his car the other way, probably a wise decision. He can turn around and rejoin the field, but he's dropped quite a number of places down the field there. Lap 6, and Tripp is slowly closing in on the back of Rob Jackson's McLaren. Tripp will be looking to move forward from 24. Felt those team points for the team's championship quite close. Just 2 rounds to go. It looks like Jackson went quite wide there in tyres unboxed. Allowed Tripp to go straight through. Easy place made up, so Tripp will be now into the 22nd place. Jackson appears to be having a bit of a difficult time on this track so far. Lap 7, and it's Cooley who slipped back on that first lap as we saw. Now he's coming up on Fodor as they approach Tarzan Bocht, going for the classic inside move, forcing the Audi a little bit wide, and makes that pass look pretty simple. So that'll move Cooley up into 3rd place. Gangsep, no doubt having dropped out with that stop-go 30-second penalty. And we're on lap 10. We join Ivor Kangsep, climbing all over the back of Domagoj Tonzatic. Both drivers serving penalties at the start, but Kangsep had a 30-second stop-go, so if he's with Tonzatic, he's done some good time and is straight through there on the McLaren. Kangsep usually one of the front runners in the race, but has attracted a number of penalties this season, which has cost him a lot of points. He would have been a lot better in the championship if he'd avoided those incidents, but easily through on the McLaren there, taking that place, but still a long way down the field. That'll just be for 27th. On lap 11, James Fresh again with Lucas Ziegert in the frame. Lucas ahead of him, so has this pass already happened? Fresh taking a lot of speed, but Ziegert's diving into the pits quite early on in the race. I wonder if Ziegert's got a bit of a problem there. And it was also about this time that the observer drivers amongst the field will have noticed the weather report predicting a change in the weather within 30 minutes. Rain was coming, and drivers who were looking ahead were already trying to figure out how far they could stretch the dry tyres. A pit stop is mandatory in this race, but the timing of it is down to the driver, and you don't want to be pitting twice, once to change your dries and then to pit again for wets. And just as we see on lap 12, Lord Nem, did he lose that on his own then? He just suddenly seemed to end up on the grass, and a number of cars went through. He's got the 833, is it, of Beeswax Racing now right behind him, following what looked like a small mistake. And also on lap 12, perhaps associated with the same incident, you can see the Lord Nem just flash through the picture there. Tripp's closing in on him, and there he is, he's off on the grass, just rejoining the track. So Number of cars getting through there on Lord Nem following that mistake. Dropping back down the field. Not what he'll be wanting. So Lord Nem back to 19th. The Beeswax Racing right behind him. Lap 15, we're with Nyns of Beeswax Racing. Attacking the Mercedes of Daniel Oppenheisen. It's for 11th and 12th position. Now, is there a mistake by Oppenheisen? Because yes, it is. He's in the gravel behind Nyns. So Nyns, easy pass for him there. Following that mistake from the Mercedes driver, I'll move him up into 11th position, just outside the top 10. Closing in on the Audi of Ralph. Lap 16. Pablo Loro, next one to close in on Daniel Oppenheisen. Things are still dry at this point on the 16th lap, but the Mercedes loses it badly there in the corner. Luckily, Oppenheisen keeps it sort of pointing in the right direction, but does end up in the gravel trap. So Loro straight through. Oppenheisen is dropping slowly down for the field. That Mercedes appears to be quite a handful in these conditions on this track. He'll be down to 13th place now. It's lap 17. We got Rob Jackson in the McLaren with Domagoj Tonsatic also in the McLaren, just as they're approaching the Vodafone box. Rob's got the better line on the inside, forcing Domagoj behind, but Domagoj's done the switchback. Tonsatic looks to be through here as they approach the chicane of the Audi S box. Yeah, an easy through for Domagoj Tonsatic. Rob losing a place there. He'll be frustrated with this race. Every time, unfortunately, we've cut to him, he seems to be going backwards. On lap 18, Lord Nem trying to defend from Hendrik Sauwas. Hendrik usually one of the leading drivers, so it'll be a tall ask to Lord Nem to keep him behind. They're coming into the chicane again. Sauwas up the inside. And given the relative position of these two, I strongly suspect that Sauwas has already completed his pit stop. Now, it's not raining, so that could be quite a strategic mistake. And Lord Nem on a slightly wiser decision to stick with his dry tyres that may be getting a bit tired, but you don't want to be stopping twice. By lap 20, we're with Christopher Rauff, who's held off Nyns for quite some time now, and looked like, yep, I would say that Radomir Kuchar went way off track there, so Rauff is through, and Nyns is also trying to get through at the same time. He's still trying to make it stick in the background. I think Nyns has got that position as well. Going forward to lap 22, track still dry, and we're with the 833 of Beeswax Racing, being pursued by Marcin Olgars. Again, Marcin was one of the lead runners, so he will have pitted. So that might give Marcin a temporary advantage, certainly in traction and speed, plus probably got more pace than the 833 car, but he's already, what's he going to do when it starts raining? I think that's the question to a number of drivers, including Sauwas, who was just coming through. He must also have pitted. Lap 23, still no sign of the promised rain, and Pablo Loro closing in on Nyns. Some question marks now about who has and who hasn't pitted. Unlike Formula 1, there's no colours on the tyres, so you can't tell who's done what, but Loro managing to get round on the Vodafone box. Nyns slips down one place, and I'll put him into 6th. Going a little bit further forward, lap 24, still no rain. Christopher Rauff being caught by Loro. And both Rauff and Nyns have not yet pitted. We strongly suspect that Loro had pitted, which would explain the quite a big difference in pace. Loro with fresh rubber on, but both Rauff and Nyns, along with a number of other drivers, tactically looking at the weather reports and planning ahead for when the weather changes. Lap 24, Conor McCarthy down in 25th, started a lot higher up did Connell, so we presume he's also had his pit stop, closing in on XFSR Torpedo. Torpedo way off the track there in the gravel trap in the background, so an easy pass for Connell. Gets him into 24th. But again, still no sign of a rain, so if McCarthy has pitted, he may well regret that move. Lap 25, Fresh and Lord Nem, I think a couple of names we've seen quite a bit in this highlights. Fresh doing a very aggressive pass on the Aston Martin of Lord Nem in the chicane, side by side. Little touch, wasn't much in that, and they're still side by side, but Lord Nem still just in front. So Fresh and Nem fighting tooth and nail there for 13th and 14th position, with Becker in the background waiting for an opportunity to pounce. And at last, on lap 27, you can see the rain coming down. We're with Matt O'Brien and Andrei Kuchar, both battling each other and the elements. And I think that tells us that Matt O'Brien is possibly still on dry slicks. Car sliding around there as he's coming out the corner. Is that Matt Cooley behind him? And if so, that'll be for lapping. On lap 28, it's Fodor and Bajil. And the question marks will be is who has pitted and who has not. Hard to tell from the way the cars are handling. The Audi look very tentative there. I would elect to say that Fodor has not pitted and Bajil has, with the way that Bajil went around that corner with a lot of confidence, and the Audi looks to be moving around a little bit. Both these drivers are very close on pace, so for Bajil to be creating a gap like that would indicate he's got good grip. With Hujak being attacked by Watson, and that looked like Tonzetic possibly there having a bit of trouble with grip, and Hujak appearing the same. Watson straight through. Well, I know Watson pitted for wet tyres, so making that pass look pretty easy on the final corner. So drivers at this stage who did pit early onto dry tyres, possibly regretting that move, as the drivers who left it late and pitted late have far more grip. Piquera being attacked by Dami Ayo. So Piquera was doing a lot of passing before, but now with the difference in tyres, you can see Piquera struggling a little bit, moving around a lot in the car. Dami Ayo able to take a completely different line on the wet tyres with much better grip, and basically really go straight past the other Ferrari, and straight away pulling a little gap out. Another driver who waited and put the right tyres on at the right time, Nils Nyns, closing in on Sindri Ragnarsson. If you look at that gap, closing straight up the inside of Shevlak. Easy pass, an instant gap behind him. Ragnarsson, no grip in these conditions compared to the wet tyres that Nils has got on that Aston Martin. So those drivers that did pit early fell right back down through the field, as those that waited and put wets on at the right time made easy killings. Dami Ayo now in lap 32, straight onto the back of Rob Fodor. Able to take a much tighter inside line as the Audi's just got no grip with the wrong tyres on. Dami Ayo through into 4th position. And the same story with Hitchcock on Piquera. Piquera we saw being overtaken by a number of cars. Hitchcock, I think, has pit for the wet tyres, able to take the inside line, and just powers straight away as the Piquera is unable to get the power down. His tyres will be moving around far too much on the damp track. I can confirm from in the race that the difference in lap time when the rain properly came down was about 9 seconds. If you're on dries, you were 9 seconds slower than those on wets. Lap 35, it's Ben Hitchcock again, caught up with Fodor, who we just saw being passed by Ayo. And those difference in tyres, making a massive difference in lap time. Hitchcock goes straight through, will take 5th place. Fodor just falling backwards. And we wait for the race finish with Matt Cooley. Also waited and waited before he changed his tyres. Matt Cooley into the last corner across the finish line, and I believe that may well make his lead on the Drivers' Championship unassailable. We'll confirm later when we look at the Drivers' Championship table, but Matt Cooley brings it home for another victory. Sarwas looks to have been in second, got his fuel right this week, he'll be pleased about that one. And Bajil, who's second in the Drivers' Championship, looked to be coming through for third place. It's time to look at driver of the day. We have got 3 potential drivers of the day this week. First one up is John Watson. Started right down the back of the field, following difficult qualifying. Almost going 3 wide into the first corner there, always very dangerous. Small accident ahead right at the start of the race. Catches the back of the Ferrari there, but only lightly. There's away and into the race without major incident on the first couple of corners. And then, as we saw in the highlights, got clonked quite hard by Torpedo going into the chicane a number of laps later. Ended up stuck, pointing the wrong way. Eventually got turned around and pulled away. But having worked his way up to 18th place, dropped back quite a number of places. All the way back down into 27th place, I believe. Watson well behind the rest of the field. Hopefully be able to close that gap up quite quick. And a few laps later, started to recover from that spin. Got up the inside of Huzak into Tarzan Bocht. Forced the Ferrari wide and made that a pretty easy pass. Got behind Baker then. And we're stuck behind Baker for quite some time. It's just in the 8th lap now, so quite an incident-filled first few laps for Watson. And eventually, from being stuck behind Baker for quite some time, made a move going up the outside, going into the chicane. Forcing him side by side through the chicane. Got the inside line for the exit. Should put him in good speed. And Baker does have to fall behind. So Watson finally passed the McLaren. But then just a few laps later makes a small mistake, puts one of his tyres on the grass, somehow managed to not lose the car into the barriers, gets it pointing in the right direction, but he looks to be back behind both Huzak and Jackson in the McLaren. So all to do again. And then shortly after that, Piqueira comes through. Watson now in 16th place. I think drivers were starting to pit, allowing Watson to move up the field. But it's still not rained, so all those drivers that pitted, as we saw in the main highlights, making a real strategic mistake. Piqueira came at him, Watson, and then Watson got side by side, but Piqueira managed to stay in front as he went down the back straight. So Piqueira eventually getting ahead of Watson. 26 laps, the windscreen wipers finally started going. And as the rain started to come down, Piqueira stayed out, I think because he's already done his pit stop. And Watson and Lord Nem came in. Also being a bit aggressive there, trying to get into the pits. There's only one entrance, it's only one car wide. But both cars in. Join Watson as he exits the pits, and very aggressive exit immediately off the limiter, trying to pull away from that other car that was exiting at the same time, but does have to be careful. There are rules about crossing the white line. The stewards may start to look at that sort of behaviour, but straight on it, going straight past Huzak. That'll be for 26th position. And continue to go past cars. A lot of cars having a bit of an incident ahead with the grip really dropping away for a lot of drivers who are still on dry slicks. So Watson there goes into that in 21st, and I think he came out in about 16th or 17th. Quite a number of cars off the track at once. So join Watson in 15th. Now he's closing in, he's got Becker just ahead of him. Becker was also on wet tyres at this point. But certainly Ragnarsson, who was having a very difficult end to the race, who was not on wet tyres, he was going backwards. I believe that is fresh as well in the 53 Ferrari. Also on wet tyres, Ragnarsson got no defence. Just one lap later, it's the last lap of the race. We're going into the final corner. And Andrei Kuchar just ahead of these drivers. Went a little bit wide. He's on dry tyres in the wet conditions, and fresh Becker and Watson were not. Well, Watson unable to get past Becker over the line to finish the race. Good result from a very bad start all the way down the back of the field. Next nomination for driver of the day. This is getting a little bit worrying because it's me again. Number 833 Beeswax Racing starts down in 22nd. Goes into the first corner. Gets pretty wide. And to me, no visible contact with the Ferrari in front, but it swung off. Push jack. But the 833 car came through intact. And a few laps later, settled in 16th place, being attacked by Loro. On the inside, Loro, a very aggressive driver, so taking the safe approach. But you can see how much Loro pushes the position, really relying on the 833 car not to drive into him, let him through. And that allowed Hitchcock onto the back bumper. Coming down the start-finish straight. Hitchcock very aggressive up the inside, as you'll see in a second. Drives up the inside, the Aston Martin turns in and they collide. Aston loses momentum, and that allowed Torpedo through as well. The Aston then got going again. Just a few laps later, Torpedo was weaving around quite a lot, trying to make an attack on Hitchcock, and the 833 car got too close, had to back out of it and ended up on the gravel, and that allowed two more cars to go through. So not great at the moment for the 833 car, slowly dropping places. And then a few laps further in, Lord Nemu appeared to be having some sort of trouble. Easy prey on the Tarzan block, first corner. The 833 car up the inside and away, back onto the rear end of Tripp, who had been stuck behind for quite a number of laps. By lap 22, the leaders have been into pit for new, fresh, dry tyres. The leaders presumably having not really looked that closely at the weather reports in their hoods. So one of those was Oljas coming through on the 833 car. And right behind it was Sawas, who had pitted for dry tyres quite early doors. Sawas going up the inside of the chicane. 833 putting up a defence, but not too strong. Knows the difference in tyres and the difference in performance and speed. Next one of the leaders to come through was Fodor, but the Ferrari just in front went off. So a little bit of chaos in that corner as one driver went into the gravel trap. The 833 went a bit deep. Fodor up the inside and being followed very closely by Bagil. Both of these front runners getting past the 833 car about 3/4 of the way through the race, but at this point just waiting for the rain to arrive, keeping an eye on the skies. And straight after the overtake was completed, the windscreen wipers came on. So not electing to pit straight away. You see how fast the rain started to come down, pretty heavy. So just a couple of laps later, the 833 car into the pits. A little bit later than some of the others who pitted straight away for wets, but just waiting for the conditions to get a little bit worse. At this point, 833 car had made its way up to 10th place. Emerges from the pits just behind Nyns, teammate. You see Baker going off in the background there to illustrate how difficult it was if you're on the wrong tyres. But very shortly after that, in 13th place, coming up on Ragnarsson, who we'd seen struggling in the wet conditions. And with the right tyres on, the 833 Aston Martin able to drive straight past the Ferrari TWG and starts closing in on Oppenheisen being the next car. Oppenheisen really struggling for grip now on the wrong tyres. Immediate gap opening behind on Ragnarsson, and Oppenheisen, a distance being chewed up instantly. Just a couple of corners later, what was a couple of seconds gap, the Aston Martin's right on the back of the Mercedes. Just in the background, John Becker was also trying to close in, having also switched to wet tyres right at the right moment in the race and being able to make up a number of spots. Oppenheiser tried to defend, caught the curb, slid out, and somehow the 833 car managed to avoid both Becker and Oppenheiser, sliding all over the track, came out intact and moved up into 11th place. Next up was Andrei Kuchar, carrying a bit of damage there and really struggling for pace. The much better grip on the wet tyres, allowing the Aston Martin to go straight past the Mercedes. And that was the final position over the line, from 22nd up to 10th. Final driver up for potential driver of the day is the other Beeswax Racing entry, Nyns. Starts down in 19th position. Again, gets through the first corner intact. Driver with Kuchar happening just behind. The first car he's got in front of him for the race is Oppenheiser. And at the end of the first lap, it's an aggressive Matt O'Brien. Gets up the inside of Nyns. Causes him drop back one place. So number 11 car dropping down into 19th position. A few laps later, Matt O'Brien's gone through on Lord Nem, and it's Nyns' time to also get up the inside of Lord Nem on the Tarzan box. Much faster line, straight past the Aston Martin and away, and then starts to close back up on Matt O'Brien. I think we've noticed that this season sometimes with Matt. Can make a very fast start, but then seems to lose a little bit of pace. Quite early on, just 5 laps in, Matt pits. I think a number of drivers advised after the race that it was a damp start, and some drivers put wet tyres on at the start of the race and had to pit after just 3 or 4 laps when the track dried out almost immediately. So much further on in the race now. Nyns obviously still hasn't pitted yet while we wait for the rain, and just like the other drivers being attacked by drivers who have pitted and have got fresh tyres on. So Loro there going through on Nyns, and just a few laps later the rain starts to come down, and by this point Nyns is behind Ralph. The driver had been behind for quite some time, but both of these drivers had got up to 4th and 5th respectively. And as the rain finally started to come in, it's into the pits and on with the wet tyres. Nyns from a quite advanced position, up in 5th. The Audi of Ralph being his nemesis for this race, staying in front for quite some time. So Nyns emerged from the pits, still behind Ralph, and ironically with his own teammate behind him, Steve Bezic, but 18-second the gap between Nyns and Steve. But from this point forward, the drivers that had waited for the right tyres at the right time were only going to go forward, as those that had pitted too early for dries are going to go backwards. Going through his corner, still not sure what happened. It's Oppenheiser. Oh, he went off to the left, right into the barriers or something. But Ralph went off into the left. That allowed Nyns to get through. You see Ralph just rejoining the track there. Behind, must be Olgars. So Ralph made a mistake at last and let Nyns through. And possibly he damaged his car as well. So Nyns through and Oppenheiser. And from this point forward, he was away and moving steadily through the field, straight up onto Ragnarsson, who we've seen struggling with the wrong tyres, with a few drivers going past him. Nyns immediately opened a huge gap, and shortly after that, Nyns caught Kuchar on the back straight. Hitchcock already having gone past Kuchar. Illustration of how difficult some drivers were finding it at this point, that Kuchar has lost 2 places in just 1 sector. And there's a lot of damage on his car too. Then Nyns caught with Piquera. The driver, I think, went past him a bit earlier. And now the situation reversed. Nyns up the inside of Tarzan box, straight through on Piquera. That moved him into 7th position. Next up was Fodor, another driver struggling on dries in the wet conditions. And that was through into 6th position. Well, that was lap 35, only 1 lap to go. Hitchcock on the wet tyres, so that's along with Dami Ayo, I think Bajil, Cooley and Sarwas too possibly. And Nyns finished the race in 6th position, so starting from 20th, finishing in 6th. That rounds out the action from round 7 of season 6 at Zandvoort, a race that was considerably made more exciting towards the end when the rain came in with just 15 minutes to go, and the strategy of the drivers that had held off, waiting for the weather to come in, really paid off. Quite a number of places made up. But Matt Cooley came in 1st place for McVitie's Hobnobs, taking a haul of another 100 points, and I believe it was his 3rd victory of the season. Hendrik Sarwas came in 2nd, and Wilfred Bajil was in 3rd. Dami Ayo got TWG Racing into 4th and was close for a driver of the day, but the other drivers just pipped in, making up more places from their starting position. Dami Ayo's qualifying a bit too good this week. Ben Hitchcock of the 488 team finished in 5th. Nyns, as we've just seen, came across the line in 6th place for Beeswax Racing. Rob Fodor dropped back to 7th, being on the wrong tyres towards the end of the race. Same for Karol Piquera in 8th, and Marcin Olgars in 9th. Steve Bezic of Beeswax Racing, he came in 10th. James Fresh was 11th. John Becker at FTW RacingSimTools.com got 12th. Watson, having started well down the field and had a number of incidents and put it backwards, got all the way up to 13th. But I think driver of the day must go to Nyns, going from 20th all the way up to 6th position, moving the right tactics, and for once I didn't see any spinses anywhere in this race from him. But he does have Please No Punterino written on his wing, so if the other drivers could try a little bit harder though to make him regret having that added to his car, that'd be good. In 14th place for Mercs and Recreation is Andrei Kuchar, who's really struggling for grip at the end of the race. Sindri Ragnarsson dropped all the way to 15th for TWG Racing. Saw him struggling too with the dry tyres. Matt O'Brien got to 16th. Radomir Kozierski of Phoenix Racing got to 17th. Uros Husjak 18th. XFSR Torpedo had a very up and down race, finished in 19th. And Domagoj Tonzetic got to 20th. Ivor Kangset from that 30-second stop go at the start only managed to recover up to 21st. Tripp must have had a difficult race this week. Finished down in 22nd for McVitie's Hobnobs. Conal McCarthy got 23rd. Lord and then the Phoenix Racing came in 24th. Brandon Baker 25th. Christopher Ralph, who was battling for a long time with Nyns, don't know what happened. Now, he did change, he should have changed onto the wet tyres. Can't guarantee for certain if that's what he did in the pit stop, but shortly after the pits, he just went off and into the wall, and looks like he really dropped down the field after that. So, not certain what happened with Christopher Ralph there, but he was putting a good drive for a long time. Dan Smith had a race I think he wants to forget. FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com driver. I know at one point he had to stop go 30 seconds for speeding in the pit lane and ended up down in 27th. Luca Ziegler of the 488 team got to 28th. Daniel Oppenheisen 29th. Rob Jackson, who was doing quite well at the start of the race, ended up down in 30th, and I think at one point we saw him pointing backwards. Adam Bowyers finished in 31st. Pablo Loro 37th, and Kevin Varunsang down in 33rd. Moving on to the Drivers' Championship, and it's confirmed with just one round to go. Matt Cooley is the champion for Season 6 for Tier 7. He now has an unassailable lead of 175 points, with only a maximum of 100 points available in the final round. Wilfred Bajil will be looking to confirm second place in the championship. It's not impossible for Hendrik Sarwas to pip him to second place, but the gap is 92 points. So Bajil will have to not finish next week and Sarwas will have to win. So Bajil in a good place at the moment to take second place. Hendrik Sarwas looking for third, but the gap is only 3 points between himself and Fodor. Both drivers have shown a lot of good pace this season, so the final race will definitely be down between Sarwas and Fodor to try and get third place in the championship. Luca Ziegler from the 488 team, he's in 5th. He's not too far away either. John Becker from RacingSimTools.com, he's in 6th place. Ivor Kangset drops down into 7th place with another not so great finish for him down in 21st. Ivor's had a very up and down season with some great results but also some bad ones, but also perhaps too much attention from his stewards. If he could address that, he'll certainly do very well in the next championship. Ben Hitchcock of the 488 team moves up a couple of places into 8th place. Dami Ayo, TWG Racing, with a fantastic result, leaps up the table into 9th. XFSR Torpedo, difficult week this week, drops down 1 place to 10th. And looking at the Teams Championship with just 1 round to go, still fairly tight. McVitie's Hobnobs top the table with 711 points, but just 101 points behind them is the 488 team, so not impossible, depending on the results for the individual drivers, for it to be an exchange in those positions. In 3rd place it's FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com. They are another 111 points behind, so again, a difficult order for them to catch up with the 488 team, but not impossible. Beeswax Racing, pretty good results this week, so they are in 4th position with 348 points. TWG Racing, they go up 1 place in the table, going past Big Boatley, who again, both no shows for Big Boatley, so they drop down to 6th. Phoenix Racing are in 7th, and rounding out the table is Merckx and Recreation. That rounds out the action from round 7 of season 6 of the GT3 Championship, hosted by Apex Online Racing. So for Tier 7, Matt Cooley has taken away the Drivers' Championship, leaving the drivers to battle it out for 2nd and 3rd place on the podium for the final round. The Teams Championship still quite tight, so all to be decided there next week. I hope you join us for the highlights show. And please leave a like, comment and subscribe if you want to see more highlights in the future from both Spa-Francorchamps next week or the next upcoming season of the GT3 Championship in Assetto Corsa Competizione, hosted by Apex Online Racing. Thanks for watching, goodbye.